There's nothing wrong with your television or smartphone. Do not attempt to adjust the picture or the sound. This is a video about an Andretti-run General Motors-backed Formula 1 entry looking likely to get on the grid after all. After what feels like years of the same narrative, with Andretti wanting to get into F1 and finding new ways to be rejected, the story finally seems to be changing. But even though the most controversial wannabe 2026 entry now looks like it really might happen after all, it might not necessarily be Andretti getting on the grid, at least not in name. The entry, supported by American automotive giant General Motors, the largest car maker in the US and one of the biggest in the world, is now likely to be approved after a key breakthrough, and more progress should be made in the next few weeks. It comes a little while after longtime project leader Michael Andretti stepped down from the day-to-day management of Andretti Global, the eponymous organisation he created to oversee all his racing team's activities and spearhead the F1 bid. Andretti's more distant, supposed advisory role seems to be a key part of what's changed, which is significant because he's been the driving force for this since the start, and now it's finally looking like it might get on the grid. Andretti might barely be part of it, and it probably won't bear his name either. This whole endeavour started with Michael Andretti trying to buy Sauber years ago, and when that failed, he attempted to set up a brand new entry as Andretti Global. This morphed into a dual effort with GM and its Cadillac brand last year when the FIA officially opened up the process to assess potential entrants. In addition to the Cadillac tie-up, GM decided to explore a full-on F1 engine program as well. The plan was for this to become an out-and-out works team in 2028 after 2 years of running a customer engine to begin with. The FIA loved this idea and gave Andretti Cadillac its approval, but F1 owner Liberty Media was not on the same page, and after months of very clear messaging that it was not in favour of the grid expanding, especially not for Andretti, F1 officially rejected the application. And that officially was it. F1 dangled an olive branch by claiming it might look differently on a proper GM works team in 28, so it was kicking the can down the road. But that wasn't good enough. Andretti refused to give up and continued to build its prospective F1 program. It opened a satellite base in the UK for Andretti Global alongside its new HQ in the US, recruited around 200 staff and counting, has conducted extensive wind tunnel work using the Toyota facility in Germany, and reportedly made significant progress building and crash testing a 2026 chassis. It was a bold gambit with nothing guaranteed, but now the impasse has been broken, which begs the question, what changed? The reasoning F1 gave for rejecting Andretti Cadillac the first time around can best be summarised in 3 parts. 1. F1 didn't think an Andretti-run customer team would be competitive. 2. F1 didn't think a Cadillac badge team with the Andretti name mattered much commercially. And 3. F1 was open to changing its mind about points 1 and 2 if it was convinced this would be a proper GM project. Some subtext within that is the role of Andretti the individual. He was at times very confrontational with F1 itself and the other teams. Rightly or wrongly, he had a reputation for being brash, underestimating how hard F1 would be, and overestimating the quality and relevance of Andretti as a team, organisation and brand. If you think that's unfair, don't shoot the messenger. That's just how he was perceived by the key stakeholders, and that probably meant his entry didn't get the benefit of the doubt on matters like how prepared it would be for 2026 or how serious the GM side would be. This leads us to the most significant developments that have changed the picture, a combination of Michael Andretti effectively sidelining himself or being sidelined from Andretti Global, and a renewed commitment from GM to be as involved as possible from the start of any F1 project for 2026. This 1-2 punch effectively removes a key point of friction and makes F1 see a bigger upside to the entry competitively and commercially. It has always been clear that a strong US manufacturer would definitely be welcome. The implication was that the Andretti part wasn't particularly wanted. It would be wrong to say GM is dropping Andretti to get into F1. Andretti Global is still the backbone of this plan, it will still be the entrant, it will still set up the team, and so on. But Michael himself is no longer the key figure he was, replaced by his business partner and new Andretti Global leader Dan Tauris, along with the uber-wealthy Guggenheim's partner CEO Mark Walter, and of course the representatives of General Motors. And we're expecting the Andretti name to quietly disappear from the entry itself. It might remain on the entry list as the owning company or something like that, but don't be surprised if the Andretti Cadillac name changes to reflect greater GM or Cadillac branding, or maybe gets Guggenheim in there, as it's the primary sponsor of Andretti's Formula E team. Whatever this is called, the bottom line is the identity of the entry will probably reflect the new way that F1 views this project, more of a proper GM team from the start, and a key distinction from what F1 rejected earlier this year. If you're looking for a Grand Prix that stands out even in F1's longest ever seasons, the Formula 1 Heineken Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort is the answer. From a unique seaside location and history to passionate packed crowds and off-track entertainment, the Dutch GP is much more than just an F1 race. Zandvoort has hosted some classics since 1952, and now of course it's the home of superstar Max Verstappen and his legion of orange-clad fans. But all supporters are welcome, and with McLaren's growing competitiveness, orange isn't always for Verstappen. The distinctive circuit layout sweeping through sand dunes is evident as soon as you walk in and makes it a spectacular place to watch F1 cars. Zandvoort's novel location is also conveniently within reach, as it's only 30 minutes from Schiphol Airport. The great city of Amsterdam turns 750 next year and is just a short journey from Zandvoort by train or bus. The canals, museums and lively atmosphere make it one of the most visited tourist destinations in Europe. There's not just the racing to look forward to either. Zandvoort has entertainment, culture and top international artists to bring the party. Superstar DJ Armin van Buuren headlined Super Friday last year, and 2025 promises to be even bigger. To register your interest in tickets for the 2025 Dutch GP, follow the link in the description. It would be naive not to delve further into the pressure that's been exerted on F1 owner Liberty Media in the US. This included bringing the initial rejection of Andretti and GM to the attention of US politicians who invited Mario Andretti to Capitol Hill ahead of the Miami Grand Prix in May. Unsurprisingly, many have jumped to the conclusion that F1's newfound perspective on the project is a result of being squeezed by the US government, especially as it's come shortly after Donald Trump's victory in the presidential elections. It's easy to see why an impending return to having a conservative US government may be considered a good thing for those pushing a legal case that basically boils down to why is F1 anti-competition and anti-American. We're not going to pretend to be experts on this specific matter, but all we can say is from what we've heard, Trump becoming president again wasn't a factor in the DOJ investigation or any potential outcome. But the DOJ investigation itself can't be so easily dismissed, because this is a pretty neat solution for the main protagonists. There's no reason to think the DOJ would continue to investigate F1 if it finally acquiesced and let GM onto the grid, given GM was the primary party that the DOJ cared about with its status as a massive employer in the US. So the US politicians get their way and Liberty Media stops being the reluctant centre of attention. For an organisation also trying to clear some final hurdles in Europe to conclude its planned purchase of MotoGP, eliminating legal pressure in the US is an obvious bonus. But as of right now, it doesn't seem to be the primary motivation for changing its stance on letting another American team into F1. One thing to make clear, even though part of the justification is this being more GM's F1 team from the very beginning, is any new entry will still need to wait until 2028 to get a works GM engine. It is not practical for GM and Cadillac to fast track any engine development for 2026, even if they wanted to. The GM 2028 engine intentions were only announced a year ago, and other manufacturers have been preparing for 2026 for a lot longer than that. That means this program will need to strike a customer deal, which is actually one of the factors that F1 was wary of initially. While it was always a little hypocritical to question the competitive merits of a customer team, given the majority of the current grid rely on engine supply from elsewhere, the specific worry was about whether this new entry would get a deal negotiated willingly. FIA regulations exist to force an existing manufacturer to agree to a supply deal in the event one can't be agreed to prevent any competitor ever being without an engine. F1's worry was that any deal done under duress would be late and wouldn't be optimized like other customer arrangements are, so it would compromise a new team too much. If F1's going ahead with accepting it though, that's either less of a concern now for some reason, or was never a particularly big worry in the first place. But what will this entry do for an engine? Andretti previously had a deal in principle with Renault, but that has long since expired, and Renault's shutting down its engine program anyway to become a Mercedes customer. So that's a non-starter, and who knows, maybe it's even a factor in F1's change of heart, because getting another team on the grid guarantees bringing in another engine supplier in replace of Renault. Regardless of that, the options for this new entry are to strike a deal or utilise the regulations that allocate the supply to the manufacturer already supplying the fewest number of teams. Mercedes already has 4 teams to supply for 2026, with the Works team, McLaren and Williams, joined by Renault's Alpine team, which replaces Aston Martin as it is going to have a Works Honda supply. Ferrari has 2 teams, the Works entry plus 1 customer, Haas. Red Bull will build its own engines for 2026 and supply 2 teams as well, Red Bull Racing and whatever ridiculous name the smaller sister outfit will have by then. That leaves Audi, which is taking control of Sauber and building its own F1 engine for the first time, and Honda. Neither plan to have any customers, and as a new manufacturer, Audi can't actually be forced to. But Honda would have to comply with the regulations if required because it's an existing manufacturer with only one team to supply currently. It has not been lost on some at Aston Martin's grand new factory outside Silverstone that its much vaunted new works engine could also end up being supplied just over the road from them, as that's where Andretti Global's UK site has been set up. Honda would be a very desirable temporary solution for a GM team given its track record with Red Bull in the most recent years of the turbo hybrid era. The companies also have recent history working together in the US, such as the development of the hybrid system for the latest IndyCar engine. Far be it for us to tell GM, Cadillac, Andretti, whoever ends up really in charge, how to do business, but we would like to humbly propose the first driver's suggestion, because that will rapidly become a priority if this project really does get off the ground in the next few weeks. There'll be no shortage of interest in the seats, partly because an 11th team simply means 2 more vacancies and therefore more opportunities to those on the outside looking in, and partly because a future works project with big backing is a fun thing to be part of. It's not a great stretch to imagine Colton Herta will be one of the drivers. He has been an Andretti priority for a long time, winning races and fighting for titles with the team in IndyCar, and was openly named by Michael Andretti as the #1 choice for an F1 seat. But we're not here to suggest Herta, fun as that would be, given he's a driver with a lot of talent, if about as much unpredictability to match. All F1 teams benefit from a youth and experienced driver lineup combo to some degree, but new teams really do get more out of tapping into a veteran driver. It removes a variable, can fast track certain learnings, and be really helpful for a rookie to have a proven reference alongside them. So while Herta's a perfectly good pick for the slightly wildcard younger driver spot, and there's doubtless going to be young drivers that have been overlooked so far like Felipe Drugovich who think they've got a shot here, we think Valtteri Bottas could be exactly what this project needs in the other seat. Cut loose by Sauber and therefore a free agent, Bottas will be only 36 when this team theoretically gets on the grid. Yes, he will be at the back end of his career, but he's got loads of experience, is a proven race winner, still doing a good job, would be a great teammate for Herta, and is probably available quite cheap given his F1 career might otherwise be over. He'd sort of be the equivalent of the Haas Romain Grosjean pick back in 2016. That paid off massively for Haas right away, and it's the kind of high upside a project like this should chase, with other teams already locked into driver choices for 2026 and beyond.